Hi, students. So, this week, one of the things that we are going to be talking about is subjective tests. Last week, we talked about objective tests, which are the true false. There's really only one correct answer. Um, for the question. And a subjective test, these are more like short answer and essay tests where grades are given at the discretion of the grader. So there's not necessarily a clear right or wrong. It's kind of a gray area. And so these can be very intimidating for a lot of students, but you will encounter them in your college education. And so it's really important that you are prepared for them. Okay. So when you go to take a subjective test, such as an essay test, you want to avoid your instructor's pet peeves. You guys know that I'm a former English teacher, and actually current English teacher, I should say. And there were a lot of things that I would tell my students that, did not want them to do in their essays, things that I didn't want to see in their essays. And it would frustrate me as an instructor to see my students continue to do some of those things. You may have been told when you were in high school, don't use first person, things like that. And, I'd tell my students this, and then they would continue to use first person. So try to avoid your instructor's pet peeves because trust me, as an English teacher who grades many, many, many essays over the course of a semester or over a year, and you see the same mistakes, continuing to be made, that can be very frustrating. And so, just be aware of that. You don't want your instructor to perhaps mark you down a little bit just because they're frustrated that all of their students are making the same mistake. And obviously, instructors try not to do that and to remain as impartial as possible. But these are subjective, it's up to the grader. Um, Also, ask about areas needing improvement and work on it. You know, especially in classes where you do a lot of writing. I really, really appreciate when my students ask me how they can improve on their writing. And I like to see growth. And you know, because essays are subjective and it is up to the discretion of the grader, you could have a teacher who is willing to maybe give you that extra point because they know that you have been working on something that they asked you to do. And that could be the difference between, a C plus and a B minus, or a D plus and a C minus, something like that. Make sure that you're also following instructions. You need to read your prompt so carefully. Read it over and over multiple times. It's just so important that you follow the instructions because what's in the instructions is what you are going to be graded on. Also, look for keywords, words like analyze, discuss, compare. Those are going to tell you what you need to do with your writing. When you're analyzing something, you're picking it apart, right? And you are interpreting maybe what an author has said in a specific quote or in a specific passage. When you're discussing something, you want to have a well balanced discussion. Perhaps where you have something like a counter argument, something like that, and comparing, right? You want to make sure that you are truly showing the similarities and differences between two things. So look for keywords in the instructions and use the prompt to guide you. So identify the directive words like analyze, discuss, compare, the ones that are giving you the directions on what to do with your writing. Write an outline and then incorporate the question into your thesis statement. And I'm going to continue talking about those last two bullets as we move forward here. Okay, so here is a sample prompt. Okay, it says describe a topic, idea, activity, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose track of time. Why does it captivate you? Who or what do you turn to when you want to learn more? So let's pick apart this prompt. We're going to read it over again. We're going to look for the directives. We're going to make sure that we're following our instructions very carefully. Okay, so the first word that I see is describe. And I know that when I describe something, it needs to be detailed. Okay. And we really want as much information as possible. Okay. So that is my clue that this is going to be a descriptive essay. And I'm going to want to give a lot of detail on this topic, idea, activity, or concept. Um, and then there are some questions for you to answer. And so you're going to want to make sure that you are answering these questions somewhere in your body paragraphs. So you'll want to answer the why or what question, or excuse me, the why question, and then the who or what question. So you want to make sure that you have, written strong body paragraphs that really answer those questions. Okay. So this is one way that you could potentially break down a prompt. You could highlight, you can underline, maybe make some annotations to yourself on the prompt about what is being expected of you. So let's say that I am going to use this prompt and I'm going to write an outline before I get started in my writing. So I've created a very brief outline here. A lot of students are like, I'm not going to waste my time with an outline. It takes too long. But really, this is going to be a time saver for you. And it doesn't need to be like a formal outline. It can really just be bullet points. And so this is how I would kind of organize my essay. I would start off with an introduction where I would have a thesis statement stating the activity that makes me, lose track of time. And for me, that's reading fiction. Okay. And so I would create my thesis statement based off of that. And then I would have some body paragraphs where I'd answer the why and then the who or the what question. And so you can see kind of how I've broken that down into separate body paragraphs. And I've just given very brief details. Why does this make me lose track of time? It's an escape from real life. I identify with the characters and I enjoy solving the plot, right? So I would explain all of those things in one or maybe two body paragraphs. And then I would answer the second question in the prompt. Who or what do you go for to get more? Maybe I'll read the same authors, maybe I'll read some reviews, look at celebrity book clubs, and get some recommendations from friends or family. And so I would write about that in a separate body section, maybe one or two paragraphs. So very brief outline, but I'm going into this essay, which is probably timed, if it's an essay test, where I know what I'm going to write about. And like I said, this is really going to be ultimately a time saver for you because you're not going to have that writer's block where you don't really know what to write next or, sometimes without an outline you can really like lose track of what you've been talking about and really veer off topic. I see a lot of students do that because they get test anxiety and so they start kind of rambling on. Having an outline before you write is going to just help you with your organization, but I think also relieve some of that test anxiety. So here is a thesis statement that I wrote for this essay. As you guys know, I am an English teacher, so I'm always going to tell you that the thesis statement is the most important part of your essay. And a thesis statement is your main idea. I often describe it as like a roadmap. It's telling your reader where you are going to go in the rest of your essay. And in your thesis statement, I had mentioned, turning your question from the prompt into a thesis statement. And this is one way that I did it. There's no, I don't believe there's a true formula for a thesis statement. That's really up to you. But you kind of want to lay it all out for your readers at the beginning of your essay so that they know what you are going to be talking about. So here's my thesis or my main idea for this essay test. It says, when I am reading fiction, I am so engaged that I lose track of time because it helps me escape reality. I find myself in the characters and I enjoy finding out what happens next. To further this activity, I seek out reviews and recommendations. So not only did I answer the prompt by describing this activity, but I also included the why and then the who or the what. Okay, so everything is all encompassing. Nothing in my body paragraphs is going to be a surprise for my reader. Okay, now sometimes this will happen where before an essay test, you will actually be given prompt for your essay. I teach a general composition course at another university, and I do this with my students. I give them an essay test, but they do have the prompt beforehand, and they are allowed to bring notes to class. And so if your instructor gives you the prompt before your essay test, a couple of things that you can do. Practice writing before the test. Okay, time yourself doing it, right? And I tell my students you can't bring in a written essay, and I always have them, they have to turn in whatever notes they took, but a lot of times they'll bring in an outline, and I'm okay with that. And you just have to figure out what your instructor is okay with. Maybe they don't let you have notes. It's really up to them. But just practice writing it and perfect it. Do it multiple times. And like I said, time yourself. Make sure that you have enough time to get everything in that you need to talk about. And that will help you, I think, feel less anxious, especially about writing an outline before you write, so you don't skip part. Okay, so those are some tips for you guys on subjective tests, something like an essay test. This week in your module, you are going to do a practice essay test, and you are going to be required to use the strategies that I talked about today in this lecture. You will have 45 minutes to do this essay test, so make sure that you have reviewed everything before you get started on it, and good luck.